She was born in a small African village where life followed old rules. The village was quiet, surrounded by open land, dusty paths, and rows of clay houses with grass roofs. People there believed deeply in tradition. Men were expected to be strong, loud, and brave. Women were expected to be calm, gentle, and quiet. From the day she was born, people felt something was different about her, though no one could explain it clearly. As a child, she did not cry much. She watched more than she spoke. While other children played soft games, she liked running, climbing, and carrying things that were heavier than her size suggested. At first, people laughed and said she would grow out of it. They said children were strange sometimes, but as the years passed, it became clear this was not a phase. By the time she was 10, she was stronger than many boys her age. She could lift water containers without help. She could walk long distances without slowing down. When other children fell and cried, she helped them stand and brush the dust off their clothes. Some adults admired this quietly. Others felt uneasy. Strength in a girl made them uncomfortable, even if they could not say why. Her family noticed it too. They loved her deeply and never treated her badly. Still, they worried. They worried not because she was wrong, but because the world around her was not kind to girls who stood out. Her mother often reminded her to speak softly. Her father advised her not to challenge boys openly. She listened. But it was not easy to pretend to be something she was not. At school gatherings and village events, people started watching her more closely. When tasks were given, she volunteered quickly. When something needed to be carried or fixed, she stepped forward before anyone else. Sometimes men, twice her age, looked surprised when she completed work they struggled with. Some smiled awkwardly. Others frowned. As she grew older, whispers began. They were not loud at first, just quiet comments behind her back. People said she was too bold. They said she walked like a man. They said her voice was too firm. No one said these things to her face, but she felt it. She felt it in the way conversations stopped when she walked past. She felt it in the way mothers pulled their sons a little closer. By the time she became a young woman, her strength was no longer something people could ignore. Her body was powerful from years of physical work. Her posture was straight and confident. She did not shrink herself to make others comfortable. And that, more than anything, scared people. In that village, marriage was seen as an important step. When a girl reached a certain age, families began talking. They looked for suitable matches. They discussed families, respect, and future plans. For many girls, this time brought excitement and nervous hope. For her, it brought silence. At first, families considered her quietly. They said she came from a good home. They said she was hardworking. But when men saw her, something changed. Some felt embarrassed standing next to her. Others felt challenged by her presence. A few laughed nervously and never returned. Soon, word spread faster than anyone expected. Men started avoiding her. If she appeared at a gathering, some found reasons to leave early. If she walked through the market, conversations shifted. People no longer spoke about her kindness or effort. They spoke only of her strength, as if it was a flaw. She noticed it clearly one afternoon at a community event. Food was being prepared and people were working together. She offered to help carry large containers, as she always had. A man nearby quickly stepped back and said someone else would do it. His voice shook slightly. Others avoided her eyes. For the first time, she felt something new. Not pride, not confidence, but confusion. She went home that evening with many questions in her mind. She sat quietly while her family talked around her. She wondered when helping had become a problem. She wondered when being capable had become something to fear. No one had ever told her she was wrong. Yet the world around her was slowly pushing her away. Days passed, and the distance between her and others grew. Children still admired her, but adults kept their space. Women spoke to her politely, but cautiously. Men rarely spoke to her at all. It was as if her strength made her invisible in one way and too visible in another. Sometimes she tried to change small things. She walked slower. She spoke less. She let others take over tasks she knew she could do better. But it felt like wearing clothes that did not fit. The more she tried to be smaller, the heavier her heart felt. At night, she lay awake listening to village sounds, distant voices, animals moving in the dark. She asked herself questions she never thought she would ask. Was she wrong to be strong? Was she supposed to pretend? Was her future already decided by something she could not control? Her family noticed her silence. They worried, but did not pressure her. They knew forcing her to change would break something inside her. Still, they feared for her future. In that place, a woman without a husband was often pitied or judged. They did not want that life for her. The hardest part was not being alone. It was being misunderstood. People assumed she was proud. They assumed she did not care about marriage or companionship. They never asked how she felt. They never asked what she wanted. One day, while walking through the village, she overheard a group of men talking. They did not know she was nearby. One of them laughed and said no man would ever control her. Another said she was too strong to live with. Their words were casual, almost careless. But they stayed with her long after. She did not cry. She did not confront them. She simply kept walking. But something changed that day. She realized that no matter how kind she was, no matter how helpful, people had already decided who she was in their minds. Still, she did not turn bitter. She continued helping when help was needed. She continued protecting children and supporting elders. She refused to become cruel just because others were afraid. Deep inside, she believed her strength had a purpose. Even if she did not yet understand it, as weeks passed, men openly avoided her. Some crossed the road when they saw her coming. Some pretended not to notice her greeting. The distance became obvious to everyone. People started using quiet jokes and looks. The story became clear without being spoken aloud. Every man ran away from her, not because she was unkind, not because she was cruel, but because she was strong in a world that did not know what to do with a strong woman. And this was only the beginning of her story. The days after that, realization felt heavier than before. Nothing in the village had changed, yet everything felt different to her. She still woke up early. She still helped her family. She still walked the same dusty paths. But now she noticed every pause in conversation, every quick look away, every forced smile. It was as if she was living among people who could see her, but did not truly want to. She tried to focus on her routine. Routine had always helped her stay calm. She fetched water, worked in the fields, and helped elders whenever needed. Physical work had once brought her peace. Now it only made her more aware of the strength everyone feared. Each time she lifted something heavy, she felt eyes on her. Each time she solved a problem quickly, she sensed discomfort around her. One afternoon, a distant relative visited her family. The visit was polite and friendly on the surface. Tea was served and small talk filled the room. She stayed quiet, sitting slightly away as she had learned to do. She did not want to draw attention. She did not want to make anyone uncomfortable later. When she stepped outside, she overheard part of a conversation between the visitor and her parents. The words were not cruel, but they were painful. The visitor suggested that it would be difficult to find a suitable match for someone like her. He spoke as if her future was already decided. He spoke as if her strength was a burden her family would have to carry. That night, she felt something break inside her. Not loudly, not suddenly. Just a slow crack, like dry earth under pressure. She did not cry. She simply stared into the darkness and wondered how something she never chose had come to define her entire life. Days turned into weeks. The village continued its life. Weddings were planned. Celebrations were held. She attended them quietly, standing at the edge of crowds. She smiled when required. She congratulated others. But each event reminded her of what she was missing. Men did not approach her anymore. Not even casually. If she greeted them, they responded briefly and moved away. Some looked afraid. Others looked uncomfortable, as if her presence challenged something inside them. They did not want to face. She began to feel lonely in a way she had never felt before. She was not physically alone. People were always around. But emotionally, she felt separated from everyone. She could not share her thoughts openly. She could not explain her pain without being misunderstood. Sometimes she wondered what life would have been like if she had been different, if she had been weaker, if she had been quieter, if she had hidden her strength early on. But those thoughts never stayed long. Deep down, she knew she could not live as someone she was not. Her family noticed the change in her. She laughed less. She spoke less. She spent more time alone. Her parents tried to comfort her in gentle ways. They reminded her of her value. They told her that life was long and unpredictable, but even they did not have answers. Asterisk. One evening, she sat with her mother as the sun began to set. The sky turned warm shades of orange and gold. The moment felt calm, but her heart was heavy. Her mother held her hand and said softly that not every path was meant to be the same. She said some people were meant to walk alone for a while before finding their place. Those words stayed with her, though she did not fully understand them yet. As time passed, people in the village began to treat her strength not just as something unusual, but as something dangerous. When arguments broke out, people watched her carefully, as if expecting her to step in. When disagreements happened, some blamed her presence for the tension, even when she was not involved. It hurt her deeply. She had never been aggressive. She had never used her strength to harm anyone. Yet people acted as if she might. One day, a small conflict broke out between two families over land boundaries. Voices were raised. Tension filled the air. She stood nearby, watching quietly. She did not interfere. Still, when the argument ended, someone whispered that it was good she had not gotten involved. The comment was not meant for her to hear, but she did. That night she felt anger for the first time in a long while. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind that burned slowly. She was tired of being judged for things she had never done. She was tired of being feared for who she was, yet she kept her anger under control. She knew reacting would only confirm people's fears. Instead, she turned inward. She began questioning her place in the village. Did she belong there anymore? Was there space for someone like her? She considered leaving. The thought scared her, but it also brought a strange sense of freedom. The world beyond the village was unknown, but staying felt like slow suffocation. Still, she was deeply connected to her home, her family, her memories. Leaving was not an easy choice. Meanwhile, the whispers continued. Some people said she was proud. Some said she rejected men on purpose. Some said she did not want marriage at all. None of them were true, but she realized something important. Once people created a story about you, the truth mattered less. She began spending more time with children. They did not fear her. They did not judge her. They saw her as someone strong who could protect them. Their trust reminded her of who she really was. With them, she felt normal again. She taught them games, helped them with chores, and told them stories. In those moments, her strength felt like a gift again, not a curse. Still, late at night, loneliness returned. She wondered if she would ever be seen beyond her physical power. She wondered if anyone would look at her and see her kindness, her patience, her loyalty. One afternoon, a man from a nearby area passed through the village. He did not know her story. He spoke to her politely and asked simple questions. For a moment, she felt hope. But when others pulled him aside and spoke to him quietly, his behavior changed. He became distant. He left without saying goodbye. That moment hurt more than she expected. It confirmed what she already feared. Even strangers were warned away from her. She walked home slowly that day, feeling tired in a way that sleep could not fix. She realized that no effort on her part could change how people saw her. The problem was not her actions. It was their beliefs. That realization brought sadness, but also clarity. If she could not change their minds, she would have to change how much power their opinions had over her. She decided she would no longer shrink herself. She would no longer pretend. She would live honestly, even if it meant being alone. That decision was not loud or dramatic. It was quiet and firm. From that day on, she stood taller. She spoke when necessary. She helped when needed. She stopped apologizing for who she was. People noticed the change. Some respected it. Others felt more uncomfortable. But she no longer let their reactions control her. She did not know it yet. But the village was approaching a moment that would test everyone's beliefs. A moment where strength would no longer be something to fear, but something to rely on. For now, she continued her life, walking her path with steady steps, unaware that her story was far from over, and somewhere ahead. A challenge was waiting, one that would force the entire community to see her differently. The season changed slowly, but the mood in the village changed faster. Dry winds began to blow more often, and the days felt longer and heavier. People spoke about small problems more loudly than before. Arguments started easily. Patience was thin. She noticed it. Even though no one spoke directly to her about it, she continued her daily work as usual. She woke before sunrise, helped her family, and moved through the village with quiet confidence. She no longer tried to hide who she was. At the same time, she did not seek attention. She had learned that attention could quickly turn into judgment. More people began coming to her for help, though they rarely said thank you. When something heavy needed to be moved, someone would quietly ask her family. When animals broke loose, someone would suggest she'll handle it. But when the work was done, people stepped away again, as if afraid of standing too close. She noticed the pattern clearly. They wanted her strength, but not her presence. This realization hurt more than the rejection she had faced earlier. Being avoided was painful, but being used without respect was worse. Still, she did not refuse to help. She believed that kindness should not depend on how others treated her one afternoon. While returning from the fields, she saw a group of children arguing near the edge of the village. The argument quickly turned into pushing. Before anyone else reacted, she stepped in calmly and separated them. She spoke firmly, but gently, reminding them that fighting solved nothing. The children listened immediately. They always did. Adults watched from a distance. Some looked relieved. Others looked uneasy, as if her calm control only reminded them of what they feared. Later that day, an elder spoke quietly to her father. He said that while her help was valuable, her presence sometimes made others uncomfortable. The words were polite, but the message was clear. She was being asked once again to take up less space. That evening, she sat outside alone as the sky darkened. She felt tired, not in her body, but in her spirit. She wondered how long a person could keep giving without receiving understanding in return. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future completely away from the village. A place where no one knew her history. A place where she could simply exist without expectations or fear. The thought brought both comfort and sadness. Before she could decide anything, something happened that forced everyone's attention. It began with shouting from the far side of the village. Voices rose quickly, filled with panic. People ran toward the sound. She followed, her heart beating faster with each step. When she arrived, she saw chaos. A storage structure had collapsed near the edge of the fields. Heavy wooden beams lay scattered. Dust filled the air. Several people were trapped underneath parts of the structure. Others stood around helplessly, shouting instructions that no one could follow. Fear spread quickly. Some men tried to lift the beams but failed. Others stepped back, unsure what to do. The situation grew more dangerous by the second. She did not hesitate. She moved forward without asking for permission. She assessed the situation quickly. She saw where the weight was balanced, where it could be lifted safely, and where it could not. She called out clear instructions, her voice steady and calm. At first, people froze. They were not used to taking direction from her, but the urgency of the moment left no room for pride or fear. Slowly, they listened. She positioned herself at the heaviest beam and lifted with controlled force. Muscles strained, dust rose, and the beam shifted. Others rushed in to pull the trapped people free. One by one, they were rescued. No one was seriously hurt. When it was over, silence fell over the group. People stared at her in disbelief. Not because she had used her strength, but because she had done it with calm leadership. For a brief moment, something changed. People thanked her openly. Some avoided her eyes, but their voices carried respect. She nodded quietly and stepped back, allowing others to take over. She did not stay to receive praise. She simply returned home. That night, the village buzzed with conversation. People spoke about what had happened. Some admitted they would not have known what to do without her. Others remained quiet, unsure how to feel. She lay awake, thinking about the incident. It had proven something important, not just to others but to herself. Her strength was not something to apologize for. It was something that saved lives. Still, she knew one event would not erase years of fear and judgment. Change came slowly, especially in places ruled by tradition. Over the next few days, people treated her slightly differently. Some greeted her more warmly. Others still kept their distance. But the looks of fear had softened into something closer to uncertainty. One morning, a group of elders called a meeting to discuss village safety. They spoke about the collapse and how future risks could be prevented. For the first time, someone suggested asking for her opinion. The suggestion caused quiet tension. Some agreed. Others hesitated. Eventually, they sent a message to her family. When she arrived at the meeting place, all eyes turned toward her. She stood calmly, listening more than she spoke. When asked for her thoughts, she shared practical ideas. She did not raise her voice. She did not challenge anyone. She simply spoke from experience. The elders listened carefully. They did not interrupt. When the meeting ended, no one dismissed her suggestions. This moment mattered. It was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. Despite this progress, her personal loneliness remained. Respect did not suddenly turn into companionship. Men still kept emotional distance. Conversations rarely went beyond necessity. The wall around her was thinner, but it still stood. One evening, as she walked home, she felt the familiar weight of isolation. Progress was happening, but slowly, and she wondered if it would ever be enough. She reminded herself that change did not always come in the form of acceptance. Sometimes it came in the form of purpose. That night, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would no longer measure her worth by how others reacted to her. She would focus on what she could contribute, not what she lacked. Days later, signs of trouble appeared beyond the village. Crops were failing faster than expected. Animals behaved strangely. Rumors spread about conflict in nearby areas. Fear returned, stronger than before. People began to worry openly. Meetings were held. Plans were discussed. But uncertainty hung in the air. She sensed that something bigger was coming. Something that would test the village in ways they were not prepared for. And once again, she found herself standing at the edge of attention, knowing that when fear rose high enough, people would turn toward the very strength they once rejected. She did not know how it would unfold. She did not know what role she would play. But she felt it clearly. The moment that would change everything was close, and when it arrived, there would be no room left for running away. The warning signs became impossible to ignore. The land around the village grew dry faster than usual. Crops that once stood tall began to bend and break. Wells produced less water each morning. Animals wandered restlessly, as if sensing danger before humans could understand it. People spoke in worried voices, and fear returned to the village like an old visitor. Meetings were held almost every evening. Elders argued over solutions. Some blamed the weather. Others blamed mistakes from the past. No one truly knew what to do. Every plan felt weak against the scale of the problem. She attended the meetings quietly, standing at the edge as she always did. She listened carefully. She noticed how voices grew louder when fear took over and how logic disappeared under panic. She wanted to speak, but she knew her words would not be accepted easily. Then one afternoon, the real crisis arrived. A sudden storm swept through the region without warning. Strong winds tore through the fields. Heavy rain fell hard and fast, flooding low areas of the village. A section near the river became unstable, and part of the land collapsed, taking huts and storage areas with it. People screamed and ran. Children cried. Confusion spread faster than the storm itself. Men shouted instructions over one another. Some tried to help, but did not know where to begin. Others froze completely. Fear controlled every movement. She did not freeze. She moved through the chaos with purpose. She pulled children away from danger. She helped elders find stable ground. She shouted clear directions, not angrily, but firmly enough to be heard over the storm. At first, people hesitated. Old habits returned quickly. Some resisted taking orders from her. But when another section of land collapsed and nearly trapped a family, hesitation disappeared. They listened. She organized groups to secure loose structures. She directed people away from dangerous areas. When debris blocked escape paths, she cleared them with controlled strength. Her movements were careful, not reckless. Every action had intention. The storm lasted hours, but it felt longer. When it finally passed, the village stood damaged but alive. No lives were lost. Many were shaken, injured, or exhausted. They were safe. Silence followed. People stood in disbelief, surrounded by broken structures and wet ground. Slowly, they began to understand what had just happened. Without her, the outcome would have been much worse. This time, there were no whispers. No quiet conversations behind her back. Gratitude was spoken openly. People thanked her directly. Some apologized without using words, simply lowering their eyes or nodding respectfully. She accepted none of it loudly. She helped until there was nothing left to do, then returned home quietly, her body aching but her mind calm. That night, the village did not sleep. People talked openly about the events. They spoke about fear, about hesitation, about how they had misjudged her for years. Some admitted they had been wrong. Others struggled to accept it, but they could no longer deny the truth. The next day, elders called another meeting. This time, she was invited openly. Not as an afterthought, not through her family, but directly. She walked to the meeting place with steady steps. People watched her with a new expression. Not fear, not avoidance, something closer to respect. The elders spoke about rebuilding, about preparing for future dangers. When they asked for her thoughts, the space fell quiet. Everyone waited. She spoke calmly. She did not accuse. She did not remind them of past rejection. She focused on practical steps, teamwork, and preparedness. She spoke about using everyone's strengths, not hiding them. Her words carried weight now. Plans were made based on her suggestions. Groups were formed. Responsibilities were shared. For the first time, the village felt united rather than divided by fear. Still, something remained unresolved. Later that day, she walked through the village alone. People greeted her warmly. Children ran toward her without hesitation. Women smiled openly. Men spoke respectfully. But inside, she felt conflicted. She had earned their respect through crisis, not acceptance. She wondered why it took danger for people to see her worth. She wondered how many others were overlooked simply because they did not fit expectations. That evening, she sat with her family. They spoke about the changes happening around them. Pride filled their voices, but also relief. For years, they had watched her carry pain silently. Now the village finally saw her. Her mother held her hand and said that strength often frightened people until they needed it. Those words settled deeply in her heart. Days passed as rebuilding began. She worked alongside everyone else, no longer separated. People asked for her opinion naturally now, not because they feared her, because they trusted her. Yet marriage remained a silent topic. Men respected her, but they still kept emotional distance. Old beliefs did not disappear overnight. Strength in a woman was now accepted in action, but not yet in partnership. She noticed it, but did not let it weaken her spirit. She had learned not to measure her worth by someone else's readiness to accept her fully. One afternoon, while helping rebuild a collapsed shelter, she overheard a conversation nearby. A man said quietly that she was different, not dangerous. Another replied that it took courage to stand beside someone like her. She did not react, but the words stayed with her. As the village slowly recovered, life began to settle again. The storm had changed more than structures. It had changed minds. She stood one evening at the edge of the village, watching the sun set. The sky was calm, painted with soft colors. She felt peace, but also awareness. This was not the end of her journey. It was a turning point. She had faced rejection, isolation, and fear. She had proven her worth without demanding validation. And now, she stood stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. The village no longer ran away from her, but her story was not finished yet. There was still one final truth waiting to be revealed. One final lesson the village and she herself had yet to fully understand, and that lesson would define what came next. Life in the village slowly returned to a steady rhythm, but it was no longer the same life it had been before. People moved differently now. They spoke differently. Fear no longer guided their steps as strongly as it once had, and at the center of this quiet change stood her, not as someone to avoid, but as someone whose presence brought a sense of safety. She continued working alongside everyone else. She did not ask for special treatment, and she did not expect praise. She rose early, helped rebuild what was damaged, and supported those who were still struggling. Her strength was no longer questioned, but she remained careful not to let it define her completely. What changed most was how people spoke to her. Conversations became natural. Greetings were warm. People asked about her thoughts, not out of need, but out of respect. Children followed her around, asking questions and copying her movements. Women spoke to her openly, no longer cautious or distant. Men, however, still struggled in quieter ways. They respected her deeply now, but many were unsure how to stand beside someone like her. The old ideas they had grown up with did not disappear overnight. Strength in a woman still confused them, even when they admired it. She noticed this without bitterness. She had already walked through rejection and fear. One evening, while helping an elder repair a damaged fence, she was thanked quietly and sincerely. The words were simple, but they carried weight. The elder said the village had learned an important lesson, though it came late. He said that sometimes people fear what they do not understand, and by the time they do understand, they realize how wrong they were. Those words stayed with her as weeks passed. People from nearby areas visited the village. They had heard about the storm and how the community survived without losing lives. They asked questions. They listened carefully. When her role in the events was mentioned, people looked at her with curiosity rather than fear. Some were surprised. Some were inspired. She did not speak much about herself. She spoke about teamwork, preparation, and using everyone's abilities wisely. She did not want to become a story of pride. She wanted to become a lesson. One afternoon, while sitting alone near the fields, she reflected on everything she had lived through. The isolation, the whispers, the fear in people's eyes, the nights of doubt, the strength it took to stay kind when she was misunderstood. She realized something important in that quiet moment. Her story was never about marriage alone. It was about identity. It was about refusing to shrink so others could feel bigger. It was about standing firm without becoming hard. She had learned to love herself without needing permission. As time passed, one man began speaking to her more often. The conversations were simple at first. About work, about weather, about daily life. There was no rush, no pressure. Just mutual respect. He did not try to compete with her strength. He did not try to control it. He simply accepted it as part of who she was. She noticed the difference immediately, but even then, she did not attach her happiness to the possibility of companionship. She had already built a full life on her own terms. If someone walked beside her, it would be by choice, not necessity. The village noticed this too. Young girls began looking at her differently. They watched her walk confidently. They listened when she spoke. They saw that strength did not have to be hidden to be respected. Parents began encouraging daughters to speak up, to learn skills, to trust themselves. Slowly, quietly, the future shifted. One evening during a community gathering, she was asked to speak. The request surprised her. She had never sought attention, but she understood the importance of the moment. She spoke simply. She spoke about fear. and how it can make people run away from what they need most. She spoke about strength, not as power over others, but as responsibility. She spoke about how rejection can shape a person, either by breaking them or by teaching them who they truly are. People listened without interrupting. When she finished, the silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was thoughtful. Later that night, as she walked home under a clear sky, she felt something she had not felt in a long time. Peace, not because everything was perfect, not because everyone accepted her completely, but because she was no longer at war with herself. She had stopped asking why people ran away from her. She now understood that fear often runs before understanding arrives. Her life did not end with a dramatic celebration or a sudden change of fate. It continued quietly, steadily, with purpose. She became a guide, not just through words, but through example. She showed that being different did not mean being alone forever. Sometimes it meant walking ahead so others could follow later. Years later, people would still tell her story, not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder. A reminder that strength is not something to be ashamed of. A reminder that rejection does not decide worth. A reminder that sometimes, when everyone runs away from you, it is because you were never meant to follow the crowd, and she lived knowing this truth fully. She was not too strong. The world had simply not been ready for her yet. But in time, it learned, and so did she. Time moved forward, quietly but steadily. Seasons changed, and the village changed with them. What once felt heavy and tense now felt lighter, as if the land itself had learned to breathe again. She remained part of the village, not as someone placed on a high seat, but as someone deeply rooted in daily life. She continued working just like everyone else. She helped in the fields, repaired broken paths, and supported families still recovering from past struggles. People no longer watched her with fear. They watched her with familiarity. She had become part of the village rhythm, something that once seemed impossible. Still, she noticed something important. Respect had come, but equality was still learning to walk. People trusted her strength, but they were still learning how to trust her presence without. Turning her into a symbol or expectation, she stayed aware of this. She did not allow herself to become a role people depended on too heavily. She encouraged others to act, to step forward, to believe in their own abilities. She knew that real change lasted only when everyone carried responsibility together. Young girls often came to her with questions. Some asked how to be brave. Some asked how to speak without fear. Some asked if being different always hurt. She listened to each one patiently. She never gave loud advice. She spoke honestly. She told them that fear might come, but it did not have to decide their future. Parents noticed these quiet changes. They began allowing daughters to help with tasks once given only to boys. They allowed them to speak more freely. It was not perfect, but it was progress. Men in the village also changed, though more slowly. Some still struggled with old ideas. Others surprised even themselves by letting go of pride they had carried for years. Conversations became easier. Eye contact lasted longer. Laughter returned without tension. She noticed the man who had slowly begun speaking to her more often. Their conversations remained simple and respectful. There was no rush, no promises, no pressure. They walked side by side sometimes, speaking about work, about the future of the village, about small hopes. What mattered most to her was not the possibility of companionship, but the feeling of being seen as a whole person, not a challenge, not a threat. Just a human being. One evening, while walking alone near the edge of the village, she thought about her past self. The girl who once wondered if she needed to shrink to belong. The young woman who carried silence like a shield. She felt compassion for that version of herself. She realized that strength had never been her only power. Patience had been. Kindness had been. The ability to remain gentle in a harsh environment had been her true strength. Visitors continued coming from nearby areas. Some came seeking advice. Some came out of curiosity. They asked how the village had changed so much in such a short time. Elders spoke honestly. They said fear had blinded them, and acceptance had opened paths they never saw before. Her name was mentioned often. but she did not allow the story to become about her alone. She reminded them that the village survived because people chose to listen when it mattered. One afternoon, a group of men argued about a new decision that needed to be made. Voices rose, tension grew, and the old fear of conflict returned briefly. She stood nearby, listening. She did not interrupt. When silence finally came, she spoke calmly. She reminded them of what fear had once cost them. She reminded them of what cooperation had given them. Her words were simple, but they carried truth. The argument ended without anger. That moment showed her something important. The village was no longer changing because of her strength alone. It was changing because people had learned from it. As time passed, she felt more at peace than she ever had before. Not because life was easy, but because she no longer carried the burden of proving her worth. She lived honestly. She rested when tired. She laughed freely. One night, while sitting under the stars, she thought about how stories were told. People often waited for dramatic endings, big celebrations, clear rewards. But real life rarely worked that way. Her life did not end with applause. It continued with purpose. She understood now that being strong did not mean standing alone forever. It meant being willing to stand first. Even when no one stood beside you, she had become proof that rejection was not always a sign of failure. Sometimes, it was a sign that change was needed. Years later, new children grew up hearing her story not as a warning, but as inspiration. They learned that fear could make people run away, but understanding could bring them back. And she lived knowing that even if the world once ran from her, it eventually learned to walk with her. The village settled into a new kind of normal. It was not perfect, and it was not fast, but it was honest. People no longer spoke about the past storm with fear. They spoke about it as a lesson. And when they spoke about her, it was no longer with surprise. It was with familiarity. She noticed that people no longer paused when she entered a space. Conversations continued. Laughter did not stop. This small change meant more to her than any public praise ever could. It meant she finally belonged without conditions. Her days were calm now. She worked, rested, and spent time with people without carrying the weight she once did. Strength was still part of her, but it was no longer the first thing people saw. They saw her patience. They saw her steady nature. They saw her care for others one morning. She walked through the market and noticed something that made her stop for a moment. Two young girls were lifting a heavy basket together. When someone offered to take it from them, they smiled and said they could manage. No one laughed. No one corrected them. People simply moved on. She felt something warm rise inside her chest. Change was happening quietly, right in front of her. Later that day, she sat with a group of women who were repairing torn fabric together. In the past, these gatherings had been tense for her. Conversations used to slow when she joined. Now, they flowed easily. Stories were shared. Jokes were made. Even disagreements ended with understanding. One woman spoke openly about how she once feared being seen as too outspoken. Another admitted she had held herself back for years just to be accepted. These were things no one used to say out loud. She listened more than she spoke. She realized that her journey had given others permission to be honest with themselves. In the following weeks, the man who had been speaking to her slowly began spending more time with her. Still, there was no rush, no expectations, just shared moments. Walking together, fixing things side by side, talking about ordinary concerns. What mattered most to her was that he never tried to change her. He never joked about her strength or compared himself to her. He respected her space and her choices. For the first time, she felt something new. Not relief, not excitement, but comfort. She understood then that true connection was not about fitting into someone's idea of who you should be. It was about being accepted as you are. The village noticed this too, though no one spoke about it openly. People watched with curiosity, not judgment. The fear that once surrounded her had faded so completely that it felt distant now, like a story from another lifetime. One evening, Elders gathered to discuss a future plan for the village. They wanted to create safer structures, better shared responsibilities, and clearer ways to support one another in times of crisis. This time, no one questioned whether she should be part of the discussion. She spoke thoughtfully, not as a leader demanding control, but as someone who cared deeply about the place she called home. Others added their ideas. Disagreements happened, but they were respectful. The meeting ended with something rare: unity. As she walked home under the fading light, she felt proud, not of herself alone, but of how far everyone had come. That night, she sat quietly outside her home and thought about fear. She thought about how fear had once shaped every step of her life, how it had made people run away from her without knowing her heart. She realized something important. Fear had not been about her strength. It had been about what her strength challenged. Old ideas, old roles, old comfort. Once people were forced to face reality, fear lost its power. Days turned into months. Life continued. Not dramatically, not loudly, but